Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. Boy, it was an interesting weekend. So in the 2A for me and the 2A for all of us in general. In New York, a man is now going to jail. He's in jail right now for building an 80% receiver into a gun. He's facing like 15 charges. So that's bad news. Colorado is half a step closer to civilian disarmament. In that vein, I was up there repping Go Rogue Ammunition, trying to, hate to say it, take advantage of the scare that's going on there to sell our training ammunition. So Go Rogue Ammunition, if you don't know what it is a polymer-coated lead-cast bullet that I like them because I can shoot them in my Glock, get the same performance out of a 124 grain 9mm bullet as I can my hollow points, but at 11 cents a projectile versus like $1.40 for a hollow point. This isn't an advertisement for them. I'm just saying that's why I go up there. I've used the product. I stand behind the product. I know the gentleman that owns the business, Lance Hawkins. He's very much a 2A supporter. And if he could get away with telling the ATF to roll it in the cone, he would. But he can't because he's an FFL. So he has to abide by the rules. What was interesting is seeing the dramatic contrast in the gun shows I've been to in New Mexico versus this one in Cortez. Cortez is a neighboring city. It is roughly an hour away from Farmington, north of us. It's actually should be my hometown. It's where I was born. It's beautiful. It's sad to see Colorado get into the California mindset, considering that most of southern Colorado are ranchers, farmers, oilmen, cattle, that type of people, salt of the earth type people. And to see them oppressed because of larger populous cities, just like New Mexico is. I was expecting a lot more guns than what I saw at this gun show. There was a lot more tradecraft, things associated with it, with the 2A. A lot of, politicians, believe it or not, trying to make their bones to show that they're not siding with the governor. I saw protesters for the first time at a gun show. The protester was actually, and I say the protester, he had a giant piece of plywood that he had mocked up, did a very good job at painting his sign, and he said said what we all been thinking, that there are no good Republicans either, that the Republicans are kind of do nothing. They need to get off their butt and start representing us because we're losing ground in the 2A, or at least it appears to be, until we get to the courts. All this litigation that has to happen to overturn these civilian disarmament things are a big deal. But the big contrast that I was going to say about the gun show is the generational contrast. I saw kids and young adults at this gun show. And in Farmington, where I've been to the last several gun shows, I'm seeing older and older crowds with not as many kids. And that's a problem, generational problem we're going to face as the 2A matures, as our populace matures. Because if they don't have that background of seeing what's happening in the 2A and are not exposed to it, other than video games, they're not going to be in it, and that's a problem. So, but what did I see that was really cool at the gun show? Because let's talk about cool stuff. Let's not just get Debbie Downer. So what I saw was really cool is there's a gentleman. Give me a second. So there's a gentleman that him and his wife own Fouled Anchor Guns and Gunsmithing. Now, this gentleman has been to several of the Farmington gun shows, and he naturally is going to be in the one in Colorado because his business is out of Durango, Colorado. But he's a real deal gunsmith, and that's rare in my area to have a gunsmith that's not just like an armor-level guy. This guy can build custom guns. He doesn't. He does a lot more repair work because that's kind of what pays the bills, in addition to dealing firearms. He sells some of the most beautiful classic firearms I've ever seen. He had a $9,000 Mauser, low Mauser, so that if you're a gun collector like I am, a Mauser from pre-World War I even, that was made for a civilian to hunt with. It was very much worth the 10 grand he's asking for it, because it is a low serial numbered original Mauser before they even became real military machines. So, and he's got a lot of collectible guns in addition to modern guns too. So I thought I'd plug Fouled Anchor Guns and Gunsmithing too, because the gentleman and his wife are great. Their name escapes me, but that's not their fault. It's because my name, once I'm introduced to someone, I don't remember names worth a damn. But they are amazing people. They are very customer focused. They're very much about the 2A, and they're trying to, make an honest living as a gunsmith should. It's just hard for them because think about all the regulations that tie them up, even for just doing day-to-day business. I saw a Valmet. So if you don't know what a Valmet is a Finnish AK. In the United States, they're not very plentiful. You're not going to find a lot of them. Most of them that came in were 5.56. To my knowledge, there was 7.62 by 39 also that came through. It is a really, really high polished AK is the best way to put it. It has the Western style sights. It has got a little more ergonomic improvement, but it still has a lot of the Kalashnikov feel, and it has the reliability of the Kalashnikov. Now, the Finns, if you don't know history, the Finns have been in war with the Russians one way or another several times, and they've adopted a lot of the Russian munitions because of supply chains. They're also now a NATO member, and they train their civilian populace to be gun dudes. Now, you have to go through some hoops to be a gun guy in Finland, but you still can get them, just like Slovenia. These are the two countries that if I was going to live in Europe, I would really consider very hard at working and living in. But I don't speak Slovenian, and I damn sure don't speak Finnish. And I would like to think about that a little more before I did something like that. I'm still a fan of the United States, though. I saw a Sentry Tantal. Now, if you don't know what a Tantal is, so being an AK guy, AKs instantly draw me to them like, I don't know, they just seem to find me. Now, why is a Sentry Tantal kind of cool and kind of not? Because you don't see very many 5.45s nowadays, except from like Palmetto State Armory. And if you do find them, they're usually Russian, which is even better, but the 5.45 is getting harder and harder to find. The cartridge itself is. Why the Tantal drew my attention? For two reasons. One is the caliber. Two is it's a Polish Tantal. So Tantals are kind of a funky AK-74 that's kind of nuanced and cool. At the same time, the Sentry ones particularly have a bad reputation because they made a ton of them with 5.56 barrels, but kept them and build them as 5.45. Now, what this did was cause the bullets to keyhole. So this gun, shocking to me, was at $2,300 or $2,000 if you actually wanted to haggle with the guy. Now, why is that mind-boggling to me? The Tantals, when they came in at their heyday, you could probably get them for sub $400. And I know the world has changed and the 2A has changed. I never thought I'd see a day where I would see something that is like a bargain bin AK-74 at over $2,000, and that's the market. AKs have gained in popularity. There's a lot of swagger around the Kalashnikov platform nowadays. Even AR guys are getting into them. I would say let the buyer beware. I would also say that there are certain brands of Kalashnikovs that you actually need to know about before you just go out and buy one. If you're going to buy one just to try out, I would stay with Palmetto State Armory for one and only one reason. They have a lifetime warranty. Any issues you have with a Kalashnikov could be fixed and remedied by them pretty rapidly. The older generations of their Palmetto State Armory builds had some teething issues. They have since worked that out. They still have a lifetime warranty on them, and that's what would attract me to them. And they have 5.56 7.62 by 39, 5.45, and very soon they're going to have a 300 blackout Kalashnikov. Now, some people would say, why would you want a 5.56 or a 300 blackout in a Kalashnikov? Well, if you enjoy the platform, having an American caliber that you're always going to have access to the ammunition is a good thing. But the 300 blackout really ballistically is not much different than a 300 than the 7.62 by 39 ballistically. What I can tell you about Kalashnikovs is suppressing them isn't as easy as you can for an AR-15. The tolerances on them, depends on when the Kalashnikov was built. They have left-handed threads, number one. Number two, the barrels aren't always concentric, which means that you could get a baffle strike. Number three, there's a potential, if it's not concentric, you're going to have, that's a separate issue. Where I was going to go with this is that you're going to get piston pop. Any piston-driven rifle is going to have a piston, right, a gas piston. Well, that gas escapes and then impinges on that piston to make the gun work. Well, that actually creates sound also. And when I say piston pop, what you're actually going to hear if you get the right suppressor with a Kalashnikov is that pop of that piston is going to be louder than the report of the gun. So it kind of defeats the purpose of doing that. That's why direct impingement ARs make better hosts for suppressors than a Kalashnikov would. They look cool, especially if you can get the Russian-looking AK suppressors. The question is, why would you want it? The real answer that I found with suppressors, because Go Rogue makes 150 grain subsonic 9mm ammunition, is why wouldn't you? It's very good for you in that it doesn't damage your hearing. And for someone who's had hearing loss because of the exposure they've had to 2A stuff, it makes a lot of sense to me. I'm looking more and more at getting a suppressor. My first one will probably be for my MP5 because it looks cool, and it would serve a number of strategic roles. Home defense for the MP5, I haven't pressed that into that role yet because of how loud it's going to be. That said, I damn sure use my AR-15, but my AR-15's got a similar problem, right, with the sound. The other thing I saw was a lot of, like I said, vendors. I was shocked. Anywhere from food vendors to drink vendors, coffee vendors, that was a first. People rocking the product, and I mean shirts, hats, representing the 2A. To me, that's a global effort. And in our gun shows in Farmington, we don't see that. What we normally see are just gun vendors, and they're usually boomer fuds, except for a few of the guys that come out and represent the 2A the best they can and trying to make an honest living, and are younger, trying to break into the industry. And this industry, from what I can tell, because I've tried for several years to get into the 2A industry myself, because it is a passion for me, is hard to get into. You have to know somebody, or you have to have some sort of extreme great product that gets you into the industry. And, I am a big fan of my buddy's product, Go Rogue, because I've used it personally. And I hope he makes it big into the 2A. And we will be covering him on New Mexico Black Rifle Operators exclusively soon. I covered with Lance that we're probably going to do a reloading series that we're going to upload to Rumble, where we're going to talk about the entry-level stuff you're going to need to reload, because that was one of the most requested things I've had from my audience, which is very small, so I get to interact with them pretty well. By the way, like, share, subscribe, please. That helps with this type of thing. And I saw lots of kids, little guys, and Lance brings spent .50 caliber cartridges so that he can hand them out to people. Now, to little guys. Now, why is that? It makes a memory with these little guys. That's something my dad did with me, is that taking me to gun shows, I have those memories of going with my dad and my uncle and my brothers. I remember some vendors that did something similar. I also remember Phil Ross, who was a gunsmith in Farmington, New Mexico, who sat me on the counter in his shop and gave me a sucker and then walked me through what he does on a day-to-day business while he let my dad browse what he had. That probably helped solidify that I would be a 2A guy. You know, I've been exposed to guns since I was a very young guy. You know, I worked with someone, Lance's girlfriend, who likes to tell people that I'm a gun expert. I don't ever want to claim to be a gun expert or to be an expert at anything, and that's because that means you can't learn anything more, or that you're not willing to learn anything more, or that you become some sort of authority that knows everything, and I don't see myself as that. I see myself as continually learning. Case in point, today I met a gentleman who shoots long-range 308 that was giving me tips on how to build my reloads better, and he was showing me the load data from his own set. And this guy is a nationally ranked match shooter with open sights up to 1,000 meters. That's impressive, and the guy is in his 60s or 70s. That's really impressive to a shooter, someone who does long-range shooting and has been trying to get back in that part of my life. You know, I saw a lot of cowboy guns. Cowboy guns are becoming more and more popular again. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe it's because of these gun laws, because a lever gun can actually do a lot of damage if it's in the right hands. They're also accurate, but there's a lot of nostalgia around them. Now, I saw tactical ones and I saw traditional ones. I'm more along the lines that if I was going to get a lever gun, I need to add one to my collection eventually. It would have to be a classic one. So an ideal one for me would be a Winchester Model 94 pre-64 style, top eject, so it wouldn't have optics on it, in 30-30 or 357 or 45 Long Colt or 44 Magnum. And the reason why is because if I was going to do that and I went with a pistol caliber instead of a rifle caliber like a 30-30, I'd want it to match, because I'd probably buy a pistol revolver to go with it. That helps with the logistics. That's what cowboys used to do. I got a lot of knowledge about cowboy action shooting during this gun show. I met a lot of cowboy action shooters that would tell me why they load certain loadings. It really does have to do with split times, and it really does have to do with recoil mitigation, because those old style guns don't really have a lot of recoil mitigation like modern guns. As far as the tactical stuff, I was actually surprised to see that there wasn't a lot of AR-15s, a lot of modern sporting rifles that were out for people to try to buy. And I think that has to do with most people in Colorado have already bought them. There was a few people that were looking for some, and we sold a couple, I think, or Lance did, because they're worried about, they're stocking up now. They're stocking up because they know what's going on. New Mexico is facing something similar. July 18th, the governor of New Mexico has said that she's calling for a special session. Now, this is not a surprise to me because she didn't get the gun ban she wanted. Now, she's billing it as a way to address crime in New Mexico. And she's saying specifically she wants to get guns out of the hands of felons and address people being released as soon as they're caught. Well, both of those policies are her problem already, because she already doubled down on those, so there's no point in going back, in my opinion. And a lot of the politicians on the Republican side have already called her out on this, but they're called back anyway, because the governor can call a special session. This is the 5th time she's done it in New Mexico. Those are the 2 floor votes she's openly called for. What I also suspect is she's going to try to do the same thing she did in Colorado. Now, why is she waiting till July? Because she's waiting for the June primary. Because the June primary in New Mexico determines who the presidential candidates are, as well as those people that are going to be retained for their seat in the roundhouse, whether they're Republican or Democrat. And she knows that the The wisdom of the crowd right now is that whoever's in power right now has done a really poor job in New Mexico for crime. And she's not wrong. They have done a really poor job in New Mexico for crime. We've seen a crime increase because of those policies from the governor and the roundhouse, and those jail reform and bail reform things that are pushed down by leftist Democrats. That's the only way you can say it. It isn't even the Republicans in New Mexico. You can honestly say that some of them are really trying to do stuff, which is weird, because I see both parties nowadays as kind of useless. None of them are actually sticking to their guns and defending our rights 100% or about doing what they need to do to defend us. They're more worried about wars in Ukraine and in Israel. And while I am a Christian and believe we should defend Israel to some degree, I'm kind of split on we kind of need to stay away from war. We had a war for 20 some odd years that made the world less stable than what it is, and maybe forcing the world to think like us. Not only is it not possible, but what has it gotten us? We're more exposed to terror than we ever have been because of our southern border. And we've pissed off a lot of people in the Middle East, specifically, that have a reason to come and fight us now. So why would we continue these same type of policies and try to intercede in wars that really don't affect the homeland? And while I'm for backing our allies to some degree, I'm also kind of thinking that the allies need to step up and defend themselves, because they've had an umbrella of protection from the United States for over 70 years now. It's time for them to start putting their money where their mouth is and do what we had to do at the height of the Cold War. The global order is kind of breaking down, and I'm kind of okay with that. It's time for the United States to go its own way, and it's time to be Americans again. The Civil War movie came out, and I've heard it is a leftist masterpiece, that it is all about the bad guy being Trump. I haven't yet watched it. I want to watch it because of the Boogaloo Boys that make an appearance in it, and in my heart of hearts, I kind of empathize with the Boogaloo Boys because they're kind of fed up, and they're kind of ANCAP. If you don't know what an ANCAP is, they're kind of anarchists. Anarcho-capitalist is what ANCAP is, and I've said this on this podcast before. I've kind of come to the conclusion in my old age that the government doesn't care about you. They never have. They care about you being productive. They care about you being a soldier. They care about you being basically a wage slave. But that's it. And they proved it during the COVID stuff. That was when the mask finally fell off and I became totally an ANCAP instead of a statist. There was a lot of times I had people in that type of movement, in the libertarian movement, that would call me out and say I'm still a little bit of a statist. And they were correct. I've since changed my stand on that entirely. And I no longer see the government as a net good. I see it as a net bad. Because every time the government interjects itself into its politics into our private lives, in the education system, because I've worked in the education system, it's messed it up. And it's time for civilians to take those parts back over and basically rein in our government. That's all I have for you tonight. Like, share, subscribe. Most importantly, be great. Think real hard about these sessions that are coming up. And if you're in Colorado, God bless you. I'm praying for you guys. I hope your governor actually stands like what he said he's going to do and veto these unjust bills. Be great.